Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CMA Sri Lanka's webinar series, CPD webinar series, on an interesting topic which is relevant for today, very relevant. That is a solution to debt crisis using nature, which is being talked, discussed, debated throughout the island among professional bodies, among politicians, regulators, and everybody. We have an eminent panel of speakers, starting with, we have Professor Lakshman Vatawala, who's the founder president of CMA Sri Lanka, who's known to everybody, I guess, who has a lot of experience in the field of from finance to public sector to banking to even starting from scratch, anything. Then we have Mr. Ranjit Wickramasinghe, who was the former chairman of Ports Authority and Ceylon Shipping Corporation, and group head of financial analysis, group treasury, corporate planning, head of Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines. And we have Chevan Daniel, who's the group director of Maharaja Group, who's known to everybody, I guess. He's a media personality. So he's known everybody knows him, right? So let's see who will speak to us on the Sea of Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka water heritage. We also have Mr. Ananda Malavarachi. He's the country representative head of IUCN, will comment to us on how best we can use nature in some form or other to restructure our debt. I mean, it may not be viable. I mean, I don't think we can practically cater to all that, but some way we can do it. So while protecting our nature, as you know, recently there were enough and more reports that how the Europe is facing a great water crisis. Even the big rivers are drying up. So we need to get our act together before that tsunami hits us before long. So to start with, I will ask Professor Vatawala to give the welcome address and the introductory remarks. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. As you know, Mr. Adrian Perra is a moderator. He is a former council member of CMA Sri Lanka, a past chairman of the ACCA Sri Lanka branch, and he's also currently the CEO of Lanka Rating Agency. So I thought that he was the best person to moderate this session where we are looking at a solution to the debt crisis using nature. So as we mentioned, we have a very eminent panel. So I must thank all of them for kindly consenting and agreeing to speak at this webinar that we are conducting today. Especially Mr. Ranjit Wickramasinghe has been talking to me on this plan that he's having, whether there is another way that we can rescue Sri Lanka, because we all know that we are planning to go to the IMF and hoping that they will give us the dollars, but I'm sure Mr. Ranjit Wickramasinghe will have a different formula which we may need to look at. And this is also something that the international agencies are looking at, like the United Nations, and they've also done certain maybe experiments with some of the countries. But you know that our debt is a very, very big amount, 60 billion US dollars. And we can't really imagine how we got into that debt, So no one knows, no one is responsible. And we are all now fighting to see how we can get support from the international agencies, our friendly countries, to pull us up. But unfortunately, if you see the private sector, accountability is a key area, Without accountability, we will not be able to exist. Unfortunately, in the public sector, the government sector, we don't see this accountability. If they're accountable, then they will know when they take a decision that they are responsible. But this shows irresponsibility. $60 billion, even a housewife will not take a loan, because you must be able to earn that money to repay it. But today, people who are governing this country, I do not blame only the politicians, but the large public sector, 1.5 million public servants. Are they only eating up our money, the taxpayers' money? In fact, I saw a recent decision by the Indian Supreme Court, where some of the taxpayers associations have made representations to the Supreme Court to say that in future, if the government is going to impose any taxes, they should first consult this association to find out and give the reasons why they are going to impose these taxes. So we have two. One is, of course, imposing the taxes. The other one is how they are going to use it. So that's, I think we also may have to go for that sort of thing, because otherwise, with this large sort of 1.5 million public servants, we will not be able to really gain what we are doing. So the debt may be mainly their expenses. 60 billion is such a big one. But there is also another reason as to why we would have got into this debt, because you see, when we became a newly industrialized country, we really rose up from maybe a developing nation. And at that time, we used to get all our money from the World Bank, from the ADB and other development agencies. And that would mean that you have to do a proper study. You have to do a proper study, a feasibility study, not only do the project, but also to show how you can repay these loans. Of course, they gave very generous terms. They gave long term, and then they do it. But with our new sort of liberation that we got, we lost a lot of the incentives that we had. We couldn't get the GSP status of US and others. Our garment factory shifted to other countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam and other countries, Cambodia and others, because they lost the advantage. So we were really fighting this sort of thing. But then there was a new idea that came up. I don't know whose brainchild it was. I am sure Adrian will be able to add, because he is on the rating agency. We have the rating agencies giving the ratings for the different countries. So this is the latest method of doing things, but I don't think Sri Lanka was ready to do this sort of thing. We did not have the knowledge. We did not have the capable people, and maybe they just thought that this is a very good way of borrowing money. So they started what is called the international sovereign bonds. Not only they borrowed at very high rates. They did not have any plan how they are going to pay it. I have seen some of the reports like the Institute of Policy Studies, where they have mentioned year after year, saying that we have to repay these loans, the bunching of loans, all these have been said, but I don't think anyone reads any of these things, even the central bank report, but no one reads these, because it is of no relevance to them, because even the decision makers, even the people in the finance ministry, I don't think that they have. So we have really run into a very big problem. So we are now trying to see how we can repay it. But the best way we should have done is not to fall into debt, that's the golden rule. But today, people think that if it is your personal money, you don't have to fall into debt. But if it is government money, you can fall into debt, you can spend it, you can have a nice time. So this is what we can see, and we are really unable to repay our debts. So today's topic is a solution to debt crisis. And normally we would have said, we go to one of the international lending agencies, IMF. I think they've already gone there, they're discussing, but you know that people will not just give you loans, because the business people will know when they go to a bank, the first questions they ask, they are not just going to give you the loan. First thing is, they will want to find out, is your business viable? Now our country has to give a solution to show how we are viable. Do we have a team that is doing this at the moment? I can't see anything. If you take a private sector firm, this is of utmost importance to them. Any company, that is the first thing that they will do, no? Because if they are unable to borrow, if they are unable to repay their loans, then their company will crash. But now our government has crashed, our country has crashed, and all the people, the private sector, everyone is getting the impact of this. Because people will think that sometimes everything is very rosy, But supposing your fixed deposits, what you are having, if the government is unable to pay these debts, if the problem comes on to the commercial banks, they may cut, or maybe you may have to forego 50% of your savings that you are having. So this is the big problem that we are all going to face. So still people have not realized this. We are having these webinars to show everyone the important thing. I'm actually ashamed as a chartered accountant, as a management accountant, of the poor financial discipline in this country. We have been set up by Act of Parliament because the government has set these bodies because the country needs these professionals to come and help them. I don't think many of these institutions have any finance directors. They do not have any financial planning. They are unable to prepare their annual reports and give it on time. But these are very simple things. No? Now, if you are a public quoted company, you have to give your results. You within the end of the quarter, within a month's time, you give it. So why can't the government enforce these rules? I think it's a very simple thing. When you ask them, they say they have to set up this organization, that organization. But I also have been working in the government, I have managed state corporations and loss-making corporations. I have been able to make them profit-making. So these are really very simple things that if one wants to do it, you can do it. So they really do not know their business as to what the economy is, because politics and economics don't go together. Because politics is to give everything free, but economy, you have to manage it, you have to save it, and then do good to the people. So I think that's a very big thing that we have. So today we are talking of the nature. So I'm sure Mr. Ranjit Wickramasinghe will have a very good theme that he will speak on as to how the nature can come and help us in this rescue. But the other speaker is also someone who is known to you. He will speak to you on the Sea of Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's water heritage. That is Mr. Shevan Daniel. No, I just want to tell you one thing, now today the electricity prices have been increased by 75%. Do you know the lowest cost of how the electricity is produced? It is by water, the hydro. The cost of the hydro, because I know when I was chairman of the People's Bank, the richest state corporation in this country was the Ceylon Electricity Board, because at that time they were using hydro in the late 80s, 87, 88, 89. After that, only the other things came in. They were the richest. And many private banks were trying to take that money, but then they faithfully put it at the People's Bank where I was. So you can see that the cost of hydro power is 232 per kilowatt hour. So you can see the importance of the nature. But our people don't realize that. No, they cut all the trees. They don't conserve the water. Now you see, if they conserve this water, now we are thinking of importing fuel, no? But these are basic things our Sri Lankans can do. So these are very important area that Mr. Shevan Daniel is speaking, because I know that he is very committed to this. The potential of the sea, what real value is there in that area? Also to say that the area that we have is more than our land area. But in addition to that, the water heritage. You see, today, the most important thing is the agriculture. No? So if we conserve that water, if we are able to produce our food, then we have no problem. No. But you know what happened earlier? When the farmer's crop comes, the politician gets together. He says, okay, we will import rice. Then what happens? This price comes down. So actually, we have been managed very haphazardly, very badly. But ultimately, no one is responsible. They all come. But I must say that our monitoring mechanism, our reporting of these facts, what they have done is not been properly done. But I do hope that I know that Mr. Shevan Daniel, they are always looking at these things and commenting, but that is very essential. And because I just want to tell you, Shevan, just one thing, now we are talking of this expenditure. I know that you are very committed on this Gambudava program that you are doing. Now you go to the village, you do these projects. Just compare the cost of what you are doing with the cost of what the government is doing. Now people must understand this, because most of these things can be done at a very low cost. Now, if they were doing it that way, we would have not had this 60 billion debt, But what happens? They go, you just go to a government department, see the amount of colossal money they have spent on those buildings, the furnishing, all these things. Earlier we heard stories, they take buildings on rent and pay the rent, but do not occupy it. Now these wastages, corruption, all these things, but our society should know that all these costs have to be borne by them. Now this is something that we as cost and management accountants, we have put out what is called the societal cost. All these wastages, all these corruption, all inefficiencies will be there. Now today people are asking for wage increases. No, I think there is nothing wrong in that. But wage increases should be connected to productivity. You should have a direct connection to productivity. Then you can pay anything, no? When the productivity is high, then your production is high, your cost of production is lower. So the government has no brains to do that, So they are living in a world of their own. They say private sector, you increase the price. No. Go on productivity. It was how Singapore came to the top, So I think we have a lot of things to learn. So I'm sure that actually the topic today is going to unravel all these things that have been happening and which will help Sri Lanka in the future. Then we also have Mr. Ananda Mallavatantri, the country representative of the International Union of Conservation of Nature. I am sure he will have very good things to say, because if we conserve our nature, we don't have to go and get all these fuel and all these things, Why are we spending on that? We want gas, we want fuel, we want everything, but ultimately nothing is happening. But the most important thing is the value creation. Now, I think you can see that on our backdrop, you have to have value creation. I know Mr. Shevan Daniel will know, Mr. Ananda will know, Ranjit will know that if your organization does not create value, then very soon you have to close up. So we must tell the government, all ministries, everyone, create the value, because you are responsible for this debt. People must tell them, people must hold them responsible. Not only them, but the government officers. So many ministries, finance ministry, trade ministry, export ministry. You asked, everywhere there are so many ministries, but what is the value that they are creating? They are taking the taxpayers' money, the poor man's money, and paying them. Ultimately, these people have nothing to do. So country is bankrupt, but because they are bankrupt, the people are also going to fall into that same soup. So I think nature is the most important thing. So I'm very happy that our key speakers and the panelists have accepted their invitation. I'm sure this is going to be of great benefit. We had over 300 people who had registered. Some of them have already come in. Some of them are maybe having power cuts and other things, but they are unable to register. But we are given this free, but later we will make the video available to them so that they can go through it and then see for them. So thank you very much. I'm extremely thankful for the suggestion from Ranjit and also the support from Shevan and Anand for the conduct of this webinar, which I think will be one of the best things that we have done for this country. Thank you and all the very best.
Thank you. Professor, for your valuable comments. Just to add 2-3 points before I start the presentations, ask the speakers. This is something for Chairman. I think he is very keen on this nature and water. Today, Wall Street Journal came out with an article that basically says that Europe drain rivers squeeze Europe's economy. That includes Germany, France, UK, and it's soon going to spread to Ukraine and all those countries. So basically, their economies are going to come to a standstill. Their rivers have started drying up. Yep. So I don't know where I just told my colleagues, okay, look, this tsunami is going to come at us, because when the water start drying up, soon it going to spread to the food also. So food chain. So I think, Chevan, since you're in the media, I think it's high time I bring this topic up. At least I tell the government, look, the tsunami is coming, maybe not tomorrow, maybe 6 to 12 months down the line. It's high time we look at our water resources. Now, already we are in a food crisis. We never thought we'll get into a food crisis. We are already in a food crisis. We are trying to struggle to come out of that one. If you are having a water crisis, it's going to be worse. And I think, Professor, regarding this, how we got into the debt issue, well, I guess it's mainly of this low interest regime. Debt is good, it's not bad, but we should know what we are using for. It's like I think Professor knows, one managing director of HNB told then governor, look, even my driver has a credit card from a multinational bank. So if you continue like this, we are going to get into a serious soup. So this is where Sri Lanka, we went taking credit cards and personal loans without looking at where we are going to get hit. Okay. So, and also definitely Sri Lankans, we love subsidies. Politicians love subsidies. Private sector loves subsidies. So we always want that. So this is where we have got ourselves into. So without taking much time, I would ask Ranjit, over to you. I think we are almost there. Over to you, Ranjit.
Thank you, Adrian. First of all, let me thank Professor Lakshman Vatawala for inviting me to this prestigious event organized by CMA. Yeah, today I think the topic that I am going to present is rescuing Sri Lanka from the debt trap, dollar crisis, and reset via a nation debt sustainability instrument. Now, actually, I have published this particular instrument. It's a public document, but this only has 2 pages. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. But there's a huge amount of work that has gone into preparation of this. So let me take a few minutes to go on to the evolution of this. This is this process has evolved over a period of time. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I started looking into the economy of Sri Lanka sometime in 2017-16 time, when the governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka said our debt is X. The secretary to the Treasury said no, it's Y. Well, I think all these eminent gentlemen will remember this. To me, this was really bad. The 2 biggest flag carriers of Sri Lanka do not know what our debt is. So that prompted me to look at the economy. And round about 2019, I start delving into the Sri Lankan economy. I'm just average accountant, but then our economy has been nosediving. Post-war, 2010, we had a growth of 8%. And over the years, it came down to 6, it came down to 4. By the end of 2014, it was around 4. Then Then the next government took over in 2015, and the nosediving continued. The 5 became 4, the 4 became 3, and ultimately the 3 became 2 in 2019 with the Easter Sunday carnage. So it was at that point that I really started trying to see how do you turn around this economy. We are in for a crash, right? So I, as just an ordinary guy, did a small plan, which I call an independent professional's view to turn around Sri Lanka. This was done in 2019. And even at this time, I saw that our debt is not sustainable. Right, at that point, our total debt was in Sri Lanka was about $50 billion, requiring about $6 billion as an annual repayment, inclusive of interest. And at that point, our exports were running at about $10 billion, and your imports are running at 20 plus. And there's a trade deficit of $10 billion. Now, this didn't happen yesterday or today. This has been continuing to happen for the last 3 decades, and it's going on. So I realized that unless you fix this trade deficit, your debt is not sustainable. So what we've been doing is that we've been financing the trade deficit with earnings from our poor expatriate earnings and from tourism. So then thereafter, we were hit by this COVID-19. The whole country was closed in March of 2020. At that point, I published a document called Urgent Plan to Mitigate COVID-19 Impact on Sri Lankan Economy. This was in June. Now, I said, we have lost the 4 billion tourism income. Of the apparel income of 5 billion, maybe a good part will be lost. And I think initially we lost it. And in terms of the expatriate income, we will lose it. So I computed and that we will lose $12 billion a year. At that point, our economy was $88 billion. And when you lose 12 billion overnight on an economy of 88 billion, it's going to be catastrophe. I said, we have to come up with a plan to mitigate this. And I gave a plan. And even in this plan, I was very, I had very strong ideas that we are unable to pay the debt. We cannot continue to pay the debt. Then I looked at the strengths of Sri Lanka, because we need a burst of development to get our exports up. And I looked at various issues, and one of the things was that that I looked at was this passage of ships that are going past Sri Lanka. You know, I was one of the formative members of the Ceylon Shipping Corporation. In 1970, we set up the Ceylon Shipping Corporation. We didn't have a single ship. From 1973 to 1977, we built up a fleet of 14 ships. In 1970, the government gave us $2 billion seed capital, and that's it. You're on your own. Don't come ask for money. We went to the foreign banks. We got loans. We paid a 20% down payment. We got an 80% loan. And we paid that loan over 5 years. And like that, we built up to 14 ships by 1977. The $2 billion that the government gave, I had $10 billion in the bank account in cash, and plus another $20 billion worth of ships. It was a roaring business. So we knew the capability of shipping. So I was trying to find where do we find the money? Then we found that 45,000 ships are going past Dondra Head every year. And another 45,000 aircrafts are going past Sri Lanka. Now, none of these aircrafts or ships stop in Sri Lanka. They just bypass Sri Lanka. So actually now I will probably take you up to a little slide here. This is the great east-west shipping lane, right? So I mean, this is the Pacific Ocean, and this is Atlantic Ocean. This is the Pacific Ocean, and these ships cross from Pacific to Atlantic and Atlantic to Pacific, just passing through Sri Lanka. Now Sri Lanka is at the center of this major shipping lane. Now all these ships are passing just outside Dondra Head. They don't stop here. These ships are too big to stop here. They just go up and down. And there are 35,000 such ocean crossings, and equally another 45,000 or so aircrafts overfly. They don't stop here. So we don't get a single cent. Now, I'll take you up to the next slide. Now, this is on this side is the Admiralty chart, which shows the 4 lanes that they use. You see now in red, there are two arrows pointing to the east. So these are the highway. These is a super highway, ocean highway, going to the west. And there are another two red arrows here pointing to the west. So simultaneously, you know, it's a highway, like, you know, like the road, although we don't see anything. So every 6 minutes, a ship or an aircraft passes through Sri Lanka. Now, and you know, they carry 30% of the world trade. Whilst you and I are sleeping, this is happening. Now, I was wondering, we don't get a cent. So what are they getting? What are they getting? I did a small computation. I'll take you up to this now. This is the Sri Lanka's 200 nautical mile economic zone here, from here to here. So on the north, we share it with India, but in the east, south, and the west, these are entirely ours. So basically, all the resources that are in this exclusive economics zone belongs to us. But people can use the surface of the water to travel up and down. So the ships can move within our zone. We can't stop them. They have freedom of navigation, right? But it's not very clear what happens when they destroy our resources. So although they have freedom of navigation, and we can't stop them, we can't police them, we can't charge them, but do they have the right to destroy our resources, economic resources, in the process? That is the question mark that I am raising. So anyway, I was just trying to find out why don't they go round this way when they're going in the ship? Why does the ship go like this? That's because that's the shortest distance between the 2 points. Now, I said to you that 30% of the world trade takes this route, and world's largest ships fly on this route. If you talk about a container ship, the biggest container ship today can carry 25,000 boxes or TEUs. The biggest oil tanker can carry 400,000 tons of oil, or the biggest bulk carrier can carry 350,000 tons. So this is the size of ships that operate in this area. See, what they are doing is they come from Suez, right? Somewhere here, and they cut through Dondra Head and goes to Singapore. Now they don't go around. If they want, they can go around. I mean, you know, Sri Lanka is the only country that is on the north of the equator. And beyond that, on the south, there's not a single country until you reach the South Pole. Right? So, I mean, if they love Sri Lanka, they can go around without destroying our resources. They don't do it because when they do this shortcut, they save 400 nautical miles on a single crossing. Now, I try to compute what does it mean in terms of rupees and dollars. Now, one of these big ships, they do about 25 knots per hour, and approximately the 400 miles you would take there about a day. So they save 1 day of sailing time. Now, for a day, these big ships burn 200 tons of fuel oil. And so if they save 1 day of sailing, they save 200 tons of cost of 200 tons of fuel. Today, a ton of fuel is about $1,000. So on a single crossing, they save $200,000. And you have 45,000 such crossings. The arithmetic is very simple. You multiply 200 by 45, that's $9 billion. But that's not all of what they are getting. Now, in addition to the fuel, these ships require operating costs. You need to man the ship. You need to amortize the ship. You need to maintain the ship. So there is a cost element in addition to the fuel. Now, if you want to time charter a ship of this size today, it'll cost you $150,000 a day. So they save $350,000 per crossing into 45,000 crossings. So 350 into 45, it's well over $12 billion. Now, this has been happening for centuries, right? So let's forget the century. Let's try and see what happened during the last decade. In the last decade, conservatively, they have gained over $10 billion. Now, what is carried in these ships? If it's a container ship, it's carrying 25,000 containers. And what is inside these containers? They're all retail goods going into the USA or going into China, or vice versa. These two countries put together, control 60% of the world economy, right? So there is a lowering of inventory costs. All these supermarkets in the USA and everywhere operates on a just-in-time basis. So if you cut your supply chain by 1 day, there's a massive inventory cost advantage. So I mean, the gain that they make is hell of a lot. Now, but we don't get a cent. Now, I thought we need to use this as leverage. This is our leverage. This is the asset that I have discovered for Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka must use this asset as leverage. Now, we don't get a cent, but do you know that you get something else? You get all the carbon dioxide that is burned from this fuel that they use. So basically, then I was trying to see, okay, how does this fuel impact on our country? Now, we as a country with a population of 22 million people, we burn 6 million tons of fossil fuel. We import crude oil, we import diesel, we import petrol, we import gas, we import some coal. The total import quantity on the average is about 6 million tons a year. Now, these ships and the aircrafts, they burn double that amount and offload all that carbon dioxide to us. Now, see, in terms of international reciprocity, the idea is that I damage your area maybe by 5% and you damage my area by 5%. Therefore, you don't need to do detailed accounting. But here we get hit by a load of almost 200 times, 200%. So I was trying to put a value to the destruction this causes. Now, the destruction it causes is this. Now, this is, I call this, this is the legend of Sri Lanka's multi-billion-dollar ocean and air expressway. And for a shortened form, I call it Slim Do. Now, this is depicting the multiple and the complex destruction caused to the nature's economic resources in Sri Lanka. So basically, this is where the ships go. This is where the aircrafts go up and down. And see the destruction it does. We have the whales here. We have the dolphins. We have the turtles. We have the corals. We have the fishermen. We have the migratory birds. We have our World Heritage Sites, Sea Giria, and everything else. And we have massive biodiversity. All these are getting affected. Our flora and the fauna is damaged. Our fish is damaged. Now, ultimately, who is paying the price for it? Our poor tea plucker. Now she is down to, from 3 meals down to 1 meal a day. Our paddy farmer, I don't know whether he's even eating. Then the rubber tapper, then the coconut climber, then the cinnamon peeler. Everybody is affected by this pollution. Now, it's very difficult to put a value to the destruction that this slim door shortcut is causing us. Because you can't put a value because all our assets are priceless. Can you put a value to our biodiversity? Can you put a value to our World Heritage Sites? And then, of course, can you put a value to the whales, the dolphins, and the turtles, and the migratory birds, to the elephants? You can't put a value. If you put a value, it will be in trillions. So just to keep the argument short, I suffice to say, you guys, the world economy gained $100 billion during the last decade. Therefore, we have lost 100. So that's our contribution to the world economy. Minimum $100 billion. Today, we are grappling with a debt of 60 billion. I'm saying use this as leverage to ask for relief. I've been continuously saying in all my submissions that we need a waiver on debt. We are unable to pay the debt. Until we get our trade balance right, which if we start today, it will take 5 years, to bridge that gap. We cannot pay any debt. Whatever anybody says, our debt is not sustainable. I mean, how on earth do you pay the debt? Because if your imports and exports are having this gap, you need to bridge it. So I'm saying use this slim door as leverage to negotiate a waiver of debt. And that is not enough. If you do not get the bridging finance of $5 billion each for 2 years, we cannot get out of this hole that we are in. So I'm not bringing any legal arguments. I'm saying from a human point of view, if we have helped the world economy during the last 10 years with 100 billion, shouldn't they be giving us an interim repayment relief for 2 years while they discuss the matter? Shouldn't they give us bridging finance of $5 billion for 2 years? In total, 24 billion. Now, I think Professor Lakshman very nicely said that if you go to a bank to ask for a loan, first they ask, how do you pay the money? Now, actually, we have prepaid the money. So we have to take this to the world stage. And I, as a citizen of Sri Lanka, as an individual, I have spoken to the World Bank in the Colombo office. We are having a dialogue, right? And recently, because nothing is happening, and I do all these publications, I don't get an acknowledgement even from a government agency. Right. So I have now written to the Secretary General of the UN, the President of the World Bank, giving my instrument, saying this is the contribution our country has made. But today, I'm a citizen, a suffering citizen of this country. We are all affected. Not only the people who are poor, everybody is affected. And I think rightly Professor Lakshman said, one of these days, 50% of our savings would be gone. So I have taken this matter up. All I'm saying is that this must be taken, right, further. Actually, when I talked about this debt sustainability instrument, nature, nation, debt sustainability instrument. Now, hitherto, the UNDP and the whole world were talking about sustainable development goals, SDG. Now, in that equation, they only tag the nature and the nation. How the nation will operate in a manner to protect nature. But with the globalization, the debt has come into the scene. It has become an integral part of our economic life. And I think Professor Lakshman very, very nicely put it. As soon as Sri Lanka became a developed nation, we were able to borrow money. We went and borrowed. So now the debt has become an integral part of our life. The debt ballooned from $18 billion in 2010, post-war, to $60 billion. That's threefold increase. And during the same period, our economy only grew by 40%. How do you pay the debt? We crashed, and the debt balloon has burst. There is no way we can pay this debt. We need to ask the international community for support. I think the United Nations, right? They unite all the nations of the world together. You cannot have a nation going down with debt. That's why I call this nation sustainability instrument. They have to maintain the equilibrium of all these three forces. You cannot maintain the equilibrium of two forces. You have to bring, because everybody is having that. And Sri Lanka is very prone, because the amount of destruction that has been caused by outside forces to our economy is 200%, as I explained. In another country, it may be 10%, 15%. So we are in a unique situation. We need to explain this, right? And press on for an interim wave of debt for 2 years, and two years of bridging finance, till we get our act together, we get up. And after 5 years, yes, I have done a 5-year program for Sri Lanka, a macroeconomic plan, which is here. Right, this is a 5-year plan for Sri Lanka, and I have shown how we can get this $12 billion exports to $30 billion by 2027. At that point, we will reach a surplus on our trade. After that, our debt is sustainable. So whilst these big players discuss the matter, give us an interim waiver, give us the bridging finance, then this country can get back and possibly take care of the debt in the future. So, gentlemen, that's my little submission today.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you for keeping on your time also. The interest of time, can I ask Chevan to start? Over to you, Chevan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is my screen?
Ranjit,
Wait, sorry. I need help.
yeah.
Stop share, is it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Sorry, I'm learning.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Watavale, for inviting me to speak at this very important forum, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start with a very quick brief about the hard facts, the numbers that we all know, but I think it's important for us to set the stage for and understand where we are, so that we can then think about the potential of how we can place ourselves where we should be. I'm very thankful to Ranjit, who really beautifully described the true potential of our ocean and our water resources, and I'll try to expand on some of what he spoke as well. So right now, about 60% of our households are in debt. That's at an average outstanding of around 1.4 million. It's probably more. These numbers are about a year and a half old. A foreign debt as a percentage of our GDP is about 41%, and a domestic debt that is about 41%. And the interesting thing is, our foreign debt repayments over the past 4 years have been around $14.9 billion. Just to put this into context, the IMF facility currently, or the last one we were on, was about $1.5 billion. Sri Lanka's debt value and debt composition have changed over the years. That's from concessional long-term loans to non-concessional short-term loans, which is really what the problem has been. So I'll go into that a bit more. The reason that I'm trying to talk to you about where we are is because it's important to try to get a clear handle on the quantum of our debt and the source of our debt. It's very, very important in order for us to try to grapple with this problem. And being in the media, we're constantly trying to find people who can really pinpoint the exact number. And as Professor Watavale quite rightly pointed out, it's unbelievable that there wasn't even a proper assessment of what our debt was. The most basic thing you would expect. So Sri Lanka's outstanding debt, as you can see over the years, if you notice from 2005 onwards, it's been in a steep incline, and our rate, the rate of the percentage rate has also increased rapidly from 2019 onwards. 2018, you see a sharp increase as well, and there were reasons for that, which we'll go into very shortly. But basically, where our debt is around 17 trillion rupees, or as everyone said, around $60 billion, which is unbelievable. It's an unbelievable number. If you look at the outstanding, what is outstanding and to whom it is outstanding, it's also very interesting to note the figures here. Obviously, these numbers are from Advocata, to whom I'm very thankful to. If you look at the foreign debt, the vast majority in terms of instruments have been non-project loans financed by ISBs. And if you look at domestic debt, the ownership of that debt, it's mostly financial markets. So it's ISBs taken up by financial markets, which is the real culprit. In terms of domestic debt, it's treasury bonds, which are the main instrument, and commercial banks. So that is very important because it puts banks like Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank, in a sense, at a certain amount of risk, because some of these debts are connected to treasury bonds, obviously, and Sri Lanka development bonds, and also savings like EPF have been used in these investments as well. If you consider the foreign debt, you will notice that the vast, the significant number is not with the multilateral loans, but with the international sovereign bonds. So it's 34% of total foreign debt is with the problem is really here, international sovereign bonds, which is what we need to really figure out. Now, there have been swaps and things that have happened after this, but those numbers are very difficult to come by. If you look at our the total, the top 20 holders of Sri Lanka's international sovereign bonds, which is also interesting. It's mostly the United States through investment advisors and various companies. So here, these are some of the companies that hold the vast majority of our debt. And the other countries are over here. So you have a basic idea of who we owe, what we owe, and who can exert the most influence on Sri Lanka. Our domestic debt, as I mentioned, the key number here is EPF invested in treasury bonds, 28.8%. And if you can notice, the increasing proportion of our national income has been spent on servicing our debt as a percentage of our GDP, interest as a percentage of our GDP. So we really are up to our neck in trying to service our debt. So the problem as a result of all of this is not just poverty, it's inequality. The lowest 40% of our households earn less than half of average household income. And the thing about household income is we don't have an idea of what household income is right now. It was around 60,000 rupees about 3 or 4 years ago, but we don't know what it is right now. And at that time, about 40% of income earners earned around 13% of total income, and the richest 20% held 55%. So that was huge inequality already. I don't know what the number is today, but I would imagine that that gap has widened massively. So the richest 20% probably holds a lot more of that income, whereas there's a lot less of that income that's been shared by the 40% of the lower income earners. The poverty line has been revised to around 12,000 rupees per capita per month, but this is, I think, a gross underestimation of real poverty, because this basically works out to around 400 rupees per day. 400 rupees per day is not a wage you can live on at all. So it doesn't represent real poverty. So even if you work out the 12,000 per capita per month as your poverty line, which would probably give you a number between 35 and 40% of the population, it's probably going to be a lot more if you increase this poverty line. It was around 3,000 rupees per capita just a couple of years ago, so it's tripled. Inflation is anywhere between 60 to 70% depending on who you ask. Transport costs are up 143%, food prices up 90.9% food inflation. So the poor will get poorer, middle income earner will get poor, and the wealth gap will widen. That's where we are. So basically, Sri Lanka is swimming in debt when we should be swimming in revenue churned out of our vast water resources. So what I'm going to talk to you today is of the Sea of Sri Lanka and the weather, particularly, which I consider to be Sri Lanka's water heritage. And it's important that we truly take a minute to understand what the Sea of Sri Lanka means to us, and also why we should have a very deep and profound understanding of our water resources in order for us to understand our potential. I use the word potential because once we understand our potential, then we will realize why it's worth fighting for what is ours. Every nation on earth has developed and improved the lives of its people because they've understood the potential of their resources. The Middle East, for instance, if the Middle East were to give ownership of their vast oil resources to other nations, the Middle East would probably be like many African countries today, which are equally richly blessed with natural resources, but are in terrible states of poverty. So what we do today is very, very important, and it's important that we understand that Sri Lanka is truly blessed in terms of its water resources. So let's talk about the Sea of Sri Lanka first. Ranjit explained the exclusive economic zone already, but I want to take it a step further, and I want to call it the Sea of Sri Lanka. And there are various conventions that govern naming geographic sites in the world. There's a standardization of maritime names, and maritime limitations, geographic limitations, and peripheries are governed by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. But having said all of that, Sri Lanka, as Ranjit mentioned, has an incredible exclusive economic zone that works out to around 500,000 nautical square kilometers. And all of the resources within this exclusive economic zone is ours. Yes, there's freedom of navigation, but everything below the surface is ours. But today what happens is we have nations from near and far coming in here and pillaging all our resources, all our fishing resources, and God knows, we don't even know what we have in here, but it's been taken away, and we've lost control of monitoring and making use of these resources. So Sri Lanka really is not a small nation. Sri Lanka is quite a large nation in a sense, because we have an ocean that is ours that's about 9 times the total size of our land mass. So it's quite a large nation. So some of the reason that we suggest that we begin to call the Sea of Sri Lanka the Sea of Sri Lanka, not to replace the Indian Ocean, but to call our exclusive economic zone the Sea of Sri Lanka, is because despite the fact that there are many conventions, the US, for example, began to call our part of the world the Indo-Pacific out of nowhere about 5 years ago. The Indo-Pacific didn't exist as a geographic location maybe 5 or 6 years ago. The Sea of Japan is still being disputed by neighboring countries like South Korea and North Korea, but it remains the convention. So seas are named for historic, geographic, and political claims, but have economic value. And when we begin to claim ownership for the sea that is ours, I think as a people, as citizens, we'll begin to hold our leaders accountable for what they do with our resources. When we begin to understand that our lives could be so much better, our influence in the world could be so much stronger, our geopolitical position could be so much more stable if we look at our interests as opposed to making decisions based on the interests of other nations. I think Sri Lanka's position will gradually improve. So Sri Lanka for millennia has retained its own maritime trading traditions, independent of other nations. Geostrategic environment and foreign contacts with Sri Lanka sets the stage for the historic chain of oceanic and hinterland connectivity. So this has been going on for not hundreds, but thousands of years. Sri Lanka has been a trading hub for thousands of years. And we've done that as not as a sovereign nation as we know it today, not called Sri Lanka, obviously, but Sri Lanka as a geographic entity has been independently trading with the rest of the world for thousands of years, a claim that many nations can't make. Obviously, our ports are of historic value, particularly during the Anuradhapura period. There's so much of proof of the shipping connectivity and the kind of trading that we did with the rest of the world. And of course, cartography, map making history indicates that Sri Lankan ports and Sri Lanka was an integral part of world trade. Ptolemy's map of 50 AD, and of course Knox more recently, and the archaeology of our ancient ports and nautical technology reports also indicate that Sri Lanka, its many ports, not just 1 or 2, but up to 12 of its ports, were incredibly important, vibrant hubs for world trade. So that being the case, there's a very strong case to be made that Sri Lanka as a nation has basically made use of its sea, makes use of its ocean area to trade with the rest of the world, and therefore definite claim to call it by whatever name we choose to call our nation. It's Sri Lanka, so we should call it the Sea of Sri Lanka. As Ranjit alluded to, some 30,000 naval vessels, 45,000 aircraft, and 4,500 oil tankers traverse Sri Lanka's 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone each year, connecting the energy consumers of East Asia with the suppliers in the Middle East. Now, you can't get from Hormuz to Malacca without, or from the Red Sea to South China Sea without going through Sri Lanka. And that is incredible value. And I think most of these aircraft and most of these vessels, as Ranjit pointed out, simply pass by Sri Lanka, and there's no way for us to monetize all of that incredible traffic. And what's worse is that we've somehow managed to lose control of the southernmost port, this side of the Antarctic. So south of Hambantota, there is absolutely no significant landmass. And that is just puts Sri Lanka in such a valuable position, but unfortunately we've lost control of the Hambantota port, which we certainly should try to regain control of. So 517,000 square kilometers, it's nearly 9 times Sri Lanka's landmass. And if we are to claim a further area of sea based on the UN Convention on the Law of the Ocean, because it is based on the depth of the bottom of the sea, the sediment, we can go further beyond 200 nautical miles. So I think it's something like 1.5 million nautical square miles, which makes our exclusive economic zone incredibly enormous. And I know that there have been efforts and initiatives to make this claim, and if it works, well, we're sitting on a gold mine. So, as I mentioned, the UN Law of the Sea, Sri Lanka is entitled to claim an extended area of seabed where the thickness of the sediment layer exceeds 1 kilometer. So this has been made, and you know, if we win the claim, we stand to own an exclusive economic zone that's equivalent to 23 times the size of our landmass. It's just absolutely incredible. And when we begin to understand, you know, these are not fairy tales. This is not just something that I've come up with. This is reality. It's the reality of being Sri Lanka. It's the reality of being born in this amazing, blessed nation. And knowing this, having the facts, and then making our political and economic decisions based on these facts is very, very important. And those who are handed over the stewardship of our nation should certainly be quite aware that our nation must progress towards claiming what is truly ours. The Sea of Sri Lanka being as it is, I'd like to ask everybody who's joined us today, if you can tell me a man-made structure that has served man for over 3,000 years and continues to do so to this day. You have the pyramids, probably not. Machu Picchu, nope. The Easter Islands, the statues, nope. The Parthenon in Greece, no. Taj Mahal, well, you can go and visit it, but it doesn't do anything to serve mankind. But I'll tell you what does serve mankind to this day, and that is the Sri Lankan weaver. Constructed completely by man, by our hydraulic engineers, most over between 1,000 and 3,000 years ago. They continue to serve our people to this day. So when you pass by what you would call a tank or a reservoir, you need to understand that it's not just a bowl of water. It is a piece of hydraulic engineering. It's a miracle, really. It has, each weaver can have up to between 20 and 30 components, and each weaver is connected to many more through canals, and it works as a complete system. Sri Lanka has over 30,000 of them. And the reason it's important to understand the Sri Lankan weather is because without understanding the Sri Lankan weather, it's impossible to understand Sri Lanka itself. We are a weather civilization in a sense. Our entire being, our entire existence is is indebted to the weather. That's how we lasted as a civilization. And so understanding the weather deeply and profoundly is very, very important. So when the British colonialists discovered Mineria, for example, which was built by King Mahasen in the 4th century, the dam hadn't been breached. That's more than 15 centuries. And it was operational even then and is to this day. You can name one single man-made creation anywhere in the world that does this. Doesn't exist, does not exist. And this is why it's very sad and it is pathetic to see modern so-called development where tanks are dug up and treated like they're just holes with water in them. They're very intricate systems that need to be cared for and understood. So we talk about sustainable development. I'll tell you, we invented it. The sustainable development goals, for instance, the word sustainable is like the new buzzword for modern development. But what Sri Lanka's ancient leaders did was they basically built an ancient philosophy of water and soil conservation. The whole philosophy was designed to protect the environment, with man being part of that environment and not solely for the benefit of man alone. So the King Parakramba, whose famous quote, which we like to use, that no drop of water must land on earth without it being used before it makes it to the ocean. The word in the Mahavansa is the Sinhalese translation of the Pali word is lokopakaren, which means without serving the world, basically. So it's not just about serving man, but it's about serving everything that is connected to nature. And so the whole philosophy of our ancient irrigation system was not about taking water from A to B. It was not about conveying water from a weather to a paddy field. It is about enriching the soil. It is about making everything sustainable. It was about ensuring that animals and creatures that are dependent on the environment and nature were able to continue to thrive. It was not food at the expense of something else. It was a very long-term view of development. And I think Sri Lanka perfected it through the weather. And that is a very important matter for us to understand. So the Sri Lankan weather basically is created as part of a cascade system. It's called an Ellangawa. So I'm just going to go very quickly through the basics of a cascade system so you understand. I'm sure most of you might have heard it, so pardon me if you're hearing something you already know, but it's important that we understand what we're dealing with here. So as we know, there's undulating geography in Sri Lanka's dry zone. And what our ancients did was they observed the natural occurrences and they began to think of ways to harness the natural behavior of the geography to support their farming and their livelihood. And so they created barriers at certain locations in order to create storage areas. That's why Anuradhapura is called Vav Bandi Rajya, not Vav Hadapu Rajya or Hedi Rajya. It's Bandi. So we never actually built tanks, by bunding entire areas. We just use the natural topography, the natural geographical features, and just did the bare minimum to ensure that we could create storage areas. And the storage areas were connected via canals and ducts, and a system was created, which is called an Ellangawa. Each Ellangawa might have had between 30 and 3 and 30 weathers. So this is a basic diagram of what an Ellangawa looks like. So these little blue areas are basically weathers. And So when you start off here, this is the highest point of the land, and it cascades down all the way to the Mahaweber. Now, every single one of these little blue dots has a separate function. Some would be to protect the larger webers from floodwaters. So they are almost like barriers or breakpoints. And you find a lot of these on the way to Min area. Others would be in forests that and are meant for elephants. So this is why you don't find the human-elephant conflict as bad as it is today during ancient times, because the elephants had no reason to come to villages because they had their own weber and source of water in forested areas. And you had so many different types of webers that were protected and had a specific function. And they all worked as one seamless ecological system and basically made a cluster of villages completely self-sufficient. That's why we have so many villages in Sri Lanka, something like 35,000 villages. So we are not just a nation, but we are a nation of tiny little nations. So you have 3 or 4 villages called a Tulana, which is self-sufficient because it has its own Elanga Paddhati or cascade system. So it's important to understand just how intricate the system is, because we have 106 rivers that flow out into the ocean, 106 rivers. And I think 24 of our 25 districts, I know this because through the research we've done through GovMed, 24 of our 25 districts suffer from a lack of clean drinking water. A nation that has 30,000 webers and 106 rivers, there are people who don't have clean drinking water. It is absurd. It is just unbelievable. So each cascade system can have up to 30 individual webers. Each weber can have up to 20 to 30 individual components like the bund, the sorowa, the bisokotua. We've all heard of the stuff. And each of those components has a very specific function. The hetta, the gascommon, the kattakadua, a very specific, it's almost like a transistor radio. If you take out the transistor radio, it'll have different parts to it, and it won't work without one part. So when you're digging up a weber, when you're digging up a bund, you're actually breaking a part of a system. So you can't expect that system to work after you do that. So you need to have a very clear understanding of what you're doing when you're attempting to repair a weber. In fact, I would go so far as to say is you should not attempt to repair a weber without understanding the cascade system in which it belongs to. So there are over 900 known cascade systems and over 12,000 plus man-made webers in Sri Lanka, which is just stupendous. And yet 41% of land area is devoted to agriculture in Sri Lanka, but only 8 to 10% of that makes it to our GDP. And as I said, 24 districts in Sri Lanka are affected by a lack of clean drinking water. So there's a system, but it's broken and misunderstood and not understood. And the beginning of the revitalization or the resurgence or the revival of Sri Lanka's agriculture has to be understanding what made Sri Lanka a prosperous nation, a civilization for millennia, which was our water heritage. So what are the things we should think about here? We should be thinking about Sri Lanka's potential in terms of maritime resources and inland water resources, which are almost unmatched. Understanding that potential in real economic terms would be the starting point. What is that economic term? I really don't know. It's limitless. We must galvanize the nation and its people to reach this potential. That is very important. And the way we can do that is by creating awareness, by educating people, educating the world, in fact, and being very proud of what we've done, what our ancients have done to protect our nation and build us a civilization that has lasted for thousands of years. And we can all contribute by using the term Sea of Sri Lanka when referring to our EEZ, and also use the word weber instead of tank or reservoir, because there is no equivalent word in the English language. Reservoir or tank does not do justice to what a weber is. So we should be very proud when we use the word weber. And in fact, if we can somehow enter it into the Oxford Dictionary as a new word, I think that would do this incredible masterpiece of engineering a lot of, would do it justice. So finally, we must assess the facts, find the truth. The truth will reveal our potential. Our potential will give us a reason to defend our national interests, and understanding our potential will be the starting point for our economic revival. Thank you.
Thank you, Chevan, for the interesting presentation. In the interest of time, can I ask Ananda to give your comments, please?
Thank you, Adrian, and good evening, everyone. Thanks. It's fascinating to go after two exciting and rich two presentations. So as Dr. Vatavala said, Professor Vatavala said, let me try to do some value creation based on those two presentations. First, probably I think I might be talking, jumping around and talking certain things that are common to both presentations. I think first of all, with Mr. Vikram Singh, I think you laid out a eye-opening area which we could capitalize on. But I would like to add another dimension to it, the disaster risk reduction angle or the disaster potential. Because when you have these large ships around us, not to mention the nukes going around us in probably the same area, anything goes wrong, we know what happened to Express Pearl. At the end, we didn't get a cent. So when we present that story, probably we should present that along with the risk that the country has taken by trying to give that shortcut. Because you quite rightly described the whales and the dolphins and the livelihoods and all that. So going from there, another way I was thinking is recently, I think I remember like years back, we were studying Costa Rica and Galapagos Island. Now we have it in Hambantota. With in the east, we have the Kumana and the Yala. And in the north, we have the Udawalawe and we have dolphins and whales in the south. And then the west, we have the Rumasala Kaneli like. So if you push that idea of a zone, green zone, not so many factories, but green, like Galapagos Island, then we can say, okay, to protect that, we need to work on that region. So that gives an excuse why we are waking up to protect that area and give a different value creation into that sea lane as well. So I think these are things that will go to the UN Environment Assembly. We were working the same lines with the plastics, ocean plastics. I think it's the same thing. Different people are polluting and we are getting accused. So that goes into the polluter pays principle, and then the extended producer responsibility. I think there are elements that we need to bring in and enrich this argument. I think the argument is great. Then comes, how do you push forward? Now, I think I'm more looking at Professor Vatavala's outfit on this training and accounting methods. Now, how do you, we can tell a story, but without the numbers, without the quantifications, as Ranjit did to a certain extent, when it comes to the ecosystem, we need to do the systematic ecosystem accounting, or so that the UN has developed it to a great extent, and you value each ecosystem service provided by a given locality. That then you add it up, that gives the sum. Sum is the value that you can't even think because it's so big. The pollination to the oxygen to all the services. So that's true for WAVA as well. So once you get that system established, then we have that system also brings something called supply and use table. I think it should be very easy for accountants. You have the two sides of the book, the supply, ecosystem usage. So we need to have a net plus when you are ending, otherwise we are eating into the future generation. So likewise, I think we need to now, I believe that the whole idea of discussing today is beyond bridging the financial gap. Okay, that's good. And then how can we do this transformation? How can we bring innovation into our new emerging system and also go away from the business as usual practices? So in that context, I think we did talk a lot. Then there comes the monitoring systems that are required, because okay, you can ask, you can get it, then you implement it. I think that's coming back for the debt soft for nature as well, because no one, it's almost like if you don't have a good management effectiveness tracking tool to describe what changed, what we achieved in quantified terms and qualitative terms, no one will be working with us, because that's part of the governance. It has to be transparent, participatory, and all the good things I think we have been mentioning. So the governance system has to be complete if you want to work with the nature, because I think what we are hearing from the world is your coordination system between institutions that are working toward, that are linked to nature is falling apart. You're so dispersed. Wildlife somewhere, forest somewhere, irrigation somewhere, environment somewhere. So that brings us to the coordination. And then when you do coordination, we need national data sets, because we don't have national data sets. We have sporadic things. We don't see the discharges, the pollution going to the ocean, continuous data sets we don't have. Now, for example, if you take the US Environmental Protection Agency storage and retrieval database, you could go to any place and you can see who is around you, what are they emitting, and all that. We need to bring that cutting edge here, and it is not that costly. So going from there, there are a lot of advances that I think for Ranjit, the idea, I think there could be, I added that whole southern region green idea, but there are other areas that we could start thinking, because I remember in 2002, we did with USAID, I was a project officer, and we did the wind map and the solar map for Sri Lanka. We have 5,000 megawatts of very easily developable wind power. Go begging. And the excuse is that we cannot take it to the grid. But go to Germany, there are trains running in hydrogen, and there are buses running in hydrogen with Europe. So now imagine the whole consumption right now is 3,000. Now 5,000 at easily developable places that are lending towards. So all you need is a public-private partnership, build, own, and operate. You don't need a cent. We have the market right here for fuel and for transportation. So one or two of those will get that 5 billion very easily saved or added into the system. So then the exports, the whole world is now talking about the green challenge. Now European Union is now coming up with asking us, how much of that government has the dirty coal power used? We will deduct that portion of your thing from the GST. Now you're going to see all that. Whether your factory is located in a river basin and you are adding anything into that ecosystem, we don't want to do business with you. Now that all bring that situation that we need to prepare the country to a different world, that is ecosystem-led world. And quantification, certification, standards, labeling, all those things will come in. So that's whole greening agenda into that. There are a lot of new concepts emerging. The science-based targets, I think the life cycle analysis we have been doing, the footprints, energy, chemical, all these things are true. And then there are a lot of innovative projects that we could bring in, but I like to spend I think we are probably running short time, but I think transformation into high-paid jobs. Now, transportation is a great sector. We sacrifice all our youth to three-wheelers. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's what we did. And then can you bring all of them into mass transit in a big way somewhere? I'm sure you can do it. At the same time, high-value agriculture, greenhouses around all over the place. You don't need much space. You can do urban greenhouses. Bring these youth and things they to earn like 6-7 times of what they earn. Then I think Shevan touched upon this unclosed. It's a great idea. But again, I would go management effectiveness because ocean is a tricky thing. Mining, exploration is costly, lot of knowledge. If you do anything weird, we are going to, the whole land area is going to get polluted because we are dealing with very sensitive metals. You can't afford to have any leaks. So then whom we are going to partner with? Do we have the expertise to negotiate in the country? I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks we have, because we need to have a solid expertise to negotiate. And then the waiver, we have been doing that, Shevan, you know it, repairing tanks. It uses 6 times recycling ability of water. I mean, that's the efficiency. Water drop 6 times when you crank it through. Then the amazing features like Kattakadua, the tree species suck up all the heavy metals so that the paddy won't get affected by metal pollution. And the windbreaker is the most fascinating thing why we can explain is windbreaker doesn't let the wind to touch water, which will reduce the evaporation significantly. And that science itself we can sell to high-end ecotourism. So I think there are a lot of things that we could change in this context. And thanks again, Shevan and Ranjit. I think you have opened up, and then there are a lot of capacity building needs we require. A lot of partnerships, a lot of working together, putting heads together like this to get all of us out of this hole. I think we can do it. I think we can't ask for a better time to do it also. Thank you so much. Back to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Ananda. I would like to thank the 3 panelists for their excellent presentation. Before I go for question and answer, I think taking Ranjit's presentation, I think all this policy is very good on paper. But end of the day, these governments, all successive governments fail was implementation. Budgets are very nice. Every year we have a fantastic, all the associations have a very good cocktail party and budget presentation, budget discussion. After that, it goes out of the window. After that, nobody knows what happened to the budget. No comparison with the budget, unlike in the private sector. So nobody holds, okay, this is only a party, that's all. For professional bodies also, sad part. Anyway, but my first question to Ranjit is, Sri Lanka is not a big country, it's a small country. And unlike Ukraine, which got their debt restructured very fast because of the political reasons or whatever, Sri Lanka is not in that position. But unfortunately or fortunately, I think all 3 speakers said that we are in, our country is located in a position between East and the West. There are a lot of geopolitics. And in 2019, one admiral said in the Galle dialogue, Sri Lanka's position has become very important. Location, location, location. So we are, whether we like it or not, our country is in the middle of a place, right in the middle of this trade route, sitting like a cupcake and doing nothing. So, and Shevan said that we are unable to manage our 200 kilometers or whatever. We are going to ask for another 75,000, 23 times more. So now we are in a major soup than we can. So the debt issue, yes, it's not one party. We can't blame X or Y, but it's an accumulated thing. So of all parties' mistakes and the private sector also. So in brief, Ranjit, taking not only this geopolitics, we have internal politics, which we don't know which side we are in, which is very, very complicated. So also, how do we get out of this debt trap? And what is the shortest method? I mean, no point in writing reports. I mean, nobody reads it. We know that. So budget presentation, or it's per paper documentation only. What is the quickest method of moving out of this situation? Over to you, Ranjit.
Thanks, Adrian. Well, actually, we need to create awareness at the level of United Nations, at the level of World Bank. I think the government agencies have to come on board and take it through. You know, the problem that we are faced with is, if the government agencies are not acting, can we just step aside and say, well, that's what it is going to be? Just keep quiet. So as far as I'm concerned, this concept is evergreen. There is no time bar. This happened for centuries, and this will continue to happen for centuries. If we don't do it today, we can do it tomorrow or day after, right? It's evergreen. So you need to take it to the right place. If the successive governments are sleeping, we as citizens, what do? We need to carry it. I'm at this moment in time trying to carry this as a private citizen. I have spoken to the World Bank. I have communicated with the Secretary General of the UN. I have communicated with the President of the World Bank. I know they won't reply me. It doesn't matter. But at least I put them on notice that there is a problem and something has got to be done. So I think until an enabling government appears and takes it over, I'm afraid, Adrian, we have to run with it, right? Let's keep the flame alive, right? So that this torch can be taken like in Olympics, right? It's a long haul. It's not a short haul, right? But I was just thinking to myself, I was talking about who are the beneficiaries of this $10 billion per annum. I was thinking, what does these big ships carry? 25,000 boxes. What are inside these boxes? They are all retail merchandise. Gets unloaded into a supermarket. Next day it's sold. That's how it goes. Now, if you actually try to talk to the private sector, if the governments are unable to handle this due to geopolitics, right? The private citizens of other countries will look at us favorably. I was just thinking, you see 20%, if you take Amazon, their turnover is 600 billion. Our GDP is 80 billion as a country. Now, I'm sure that the CEO of Amazon does not know that Amazon is polluting this little nation. He's putting our tea plucker into one meal from 3 meals, our cinnamon peeler, our coconut climber, our rubber tapper. He doesn't know it. I was just thinking, if I have access to him for half an hour, I will tell him the story, and he says, he will tell Ranjit, I didn't know this, that this is happening. Is it happening? Then of course we'll have to show him, right, the facts and figures. And I'm sure he's going to tell me, I'm sorry, I didn't know. What can I do for you? You see, these are very honorable people in the world. They carry a brand name, Amazon, right? If Amazon is the biggest stockholder in the world, and if they are riding on the sweat of our peasants here, he'll be very sorry. He is going to ask you, how do I make this work for you? So, you know, that's another approach, because already, you see, these universal brands are spending money, apportioning their resources through their corporate and social responsibility budgets, right? Because they need to maintain a brand value. you cannot have a brand value which is built on sweat of our people. It's basically the same thing that was in Bangladesh when they were not paying properly to the apparel trade there, right?
Yeah, 1 minute, one more. Yeah, right.
So
One
I
more
mean,
minute.
yeah. So basically, we know about the geopolitics and we know about the local politics. Nothing is happening, right? If we leave it, then nothing will happen. So I think we need to, until the government is ready to come on board and drive the ship, we need to keep this ship afloat.
Thank you, Ranjit. Chevan, now, unfortunately or fortunately, Sri Lanka is no longer eligible for these concessionary loans, and so we had to look at a different way of looking. I'm surprised that Sri Lanka also, it's very good that you brought up that we have a lot of people who are without drinking water. I understand. I mean, North is one area, but this is what I said, that even in Europe, EU, Germany, France, London, they are going through this, and very soon that is going to hit us also, one of them, and it's going to trickle down to the food. Now, we are, as cities, we are having 200 odd kilometers, square kilometers of more than that, I guess, sea area. Now we have asked for some more. As it is, we can't manage this existing one. Now, unfortunately, or unfortunately, Sri Lanka is still importing fish. Although sea around us, everybody knows, I think so, they know that there's sea around us. So recently only we started manufacturing canned fish to become somewhat self-sustained. Although the government have been giving subsidies in different forms, private sector has still not gone into the food sector in a big way, at least to the seafood sector, the fish and all. Always they have said, the private sector has said this, the government to do their job and give us a tax concession. And also, sadly, Sheman, whenever a local producer wants to produce or manufacture, it was a private sector with the connivance of the politicians that have gone and sabotaged those operations. The big guys, not the small fellows. So that's a fact in Sri Lanka. So you are in the media, and what is your message to the private sector to get up? Because if we keep on importing fish, we are never going to get out of this mess. If we keep on importing rice, we are never going to get out of this. So what is your suggestion to or message to the private sector?
I think I would humbly suggest that the private sector retains its confidence in Sri Lanka's economy. We're facing a crisis of, I think, solvency right now. For a government to be solvent, its debt cannot exceed present value of its future primary balances. So in simple arithmetic terms, we are insolvent. So we need to resolve that issue immediately. And we have to make our debt sustainable in some way. If we can make our debt sustainable, and we don't need to default or renegotiate or restructure and make implausibly large policy adjustments in the future, I think that will bring a sense of stability. And to do that, I think the private sector and just ordinary citizens need to be fixated on the medium to long term as opposed to the short term. So the medium to long term would mean that we must demand of the social contract that we have with the government, that a stable representation of the people is the most immediate need. I think that is the one thing the private sector and just every Sri Lankan who wants a better future must demand of this or any government. A social contract is when a government and the people decide that, well, the people would would provide a government with the power that is required to meet its obligations, which is essentially taking care of the people. That's that social contract. So when that social contract doesn't exist, when the government or a government fails in its obligations to the people, then that social contract doesn't exist either. And so it's important that the government of any nation understands that its first primary objective is not the sustenance of government, but the sustenance of that social contract. That's the whole philosophy of politics. This is important for, I think, everybody to understand. And so a stable government that's able to be a true representation, a true mandate of the people would bring stability. And I think that would then eventually provide even international organizations, lending organizations like the IMF, because they have a very clear, they follow very clear KPIs like, market perception, external financial requirements, change in share of short-term debt, for example, foreign currency debt. So, they're not just standing around with wads of dollar notes waiting to hand it out for people who just come and meet them. They are very serious professionals. And so I think a stable entity that represents the mandate of the people is the key requirement. And I think that is something the private sector needs to keep a keen eye on, because that if by being short-sighted and by taking very short-term calls, we could end up in a much worse situation, which none of us want.
So what your message to the private sector is to take a long-term view rather than a short-term view, is it?
Medium to long-term view, yes. I think, yes. And also assess the facts. The facts are very, very important. I think rather than words, rather than promises, assess the facts. What do we need to do to address the facts, which is what I started my presentation on. It's very important.
Okay. Thank you, Chavan. Anand, question for you, I think. I do understand IUCN is very keen on environmental protection and all that. But unfortunately or fortunately, Anand, this environment protection has gone, it has become a more of a political stage rather than a genuine environmental protection. Certain things are done for political purposes, because I know political parties, everybody knows, even for a genuine cause, they protest. So how do you, what is your view? And now Shivan brought up the fact that there's a water issue. Now, world over, Europe is facing that one. And they were preaching, I just got a message that they were preaching that clean energy, all that, and they were saying gas is good. Suddenly, Russians say no more gas, they are going to coal and nuclear power. Well, so where they are preaching, there's something now, because they know their product industries are going haywire. So they have said, look, for the time being, let's figure out the gas thing, let's figure out our coal thing. So now we have this dilemma of where we are going to fix ourselves in. So if they have cheap gas, they'll preach us, okay, you have clean energy, environmental protection. If they don't have cheap gas, they'll go for coal and all the fuel. Now, what is your view for Sri Lanka? We have environment. So far, we haven't seen. Now there are projects waiting. Of course, Sri Lankan companies can't invest. Then we have to give outside. Environmentally friendly, wind, solar. So far, we haven't seen anybody promoting, or environmental guys promoting or giving some support of anything of that nature. If at all, they'll protest against those projects. So what is IUCN doing? That is your, can you give us?
Let's back up. IUCN's main role is pretty much helping to balance the development and conservation. We are not conservation gung-ho. As a result, now recently we completed the roadmap to green the apparel sector. That's where we showed the apparel sector, what are the things that we could do to green. And we work right now with tea, coconut, and in dairy. the whole idea is to bring the productivity up in a way that you reduce the footprints and the environment damage. So you create that win-win situation. That's as simple as that. In order to do that, you need the institutions working the way you want, regulatory system working efficiently, and then the information is shared openly. And also as I said earlier, the management effectiveness tracking tools in operation. Unfortunately for Sri Lanka, what we are seeing is these puppets in the chain are not going together. So I think that's what we need to work on, and the methodologies and all that. So we can do large initiatives. I think the green now now recently we were involved in developing one real nice one. I will use that as an example. Take Knuckles. Now we are talking about the reach to reef situation. In the central hills, we need the maximum number of green cover to get the clouds captured and convert that into the rain. Once you get that rainwater need to go into the soil and then slowly, without eroding the soil, getting into the tanks and reservoirs downstream. Now, when that happens, you keep the capacity open. You're not silting the tanks, so that hydropower, irrigation, the urban users, all that are supported along with the drought reduction, flood reduction, and landslide reduction. So that's how we see how we get the environment knowledge used. Then comes the other side, the ocean front. Now we have seagrass, we have corals, all these are, and we have mangroves. But if you start sending pollution, plastics to metals to fertilizer to pesticides to that situation, then we are doing a whole bad thing, and it's not justifiable. So that's where at the education, we need to connect these dots and say, okay, if you take out the trees in the central hills, you are not capturing rain. If you are doing bad things on the land use management, what all you're doing is you are silting the tank system that is meant for storage. Our Randanigala, Rantambe, Kotmale, Victoria, Samanala, the new ones, Kukulayanga, all these are now being silted because we have bad land use practices. Now we need to work on that. Then comes to the tank cascade Shawan mentioned, those also get water from the central hills. Then in addition, we do all kinds of things, municipal solid waste mismanagement, electronic waste, all those things. So we are sending them plastics, microplastics. Now we know microplastics can come into the food chain through fish, through milk and all that. So we need that proper understanding and minimize all these steps so that we work together. So I think this is not single person's thing. I think that's where Shawan and the media can play a huge role, because right now we know pieces of it. We know it's bad, but we don't know how bad. But we don't know the connection, how we eat the pollution and then end up in Maharagama. All we know is like somebody in your family, all of a sudden I get identified with the cancer. Or you go home, you have a headache, unexplained. So these are the type of things that healthy parks and healthy people, we need these kind of things. And Sri Lanka we have the biodiversity, we have the resources. All need is like put the right knowledge in the right place and get the right institutions to work together. Now, our regulatory institutions, sad to say, need to be dismantled and then reworked back into the system that is visible to the nation. Thank you so much. Over.
Thank you, Anand. Question for Professor. Professor.
Yeah.
Professor, now it was brought up in, I think, COPE, also in Parliament. We have about over 1,000 odd state entities. But apparently COPE's oversee only about 50 to 70, I think less than that. Even if you look at those 50 to 70, I know for sure there are certain entities, the accounts, I don't know how, were prepared. The audited accounts are up to either 2019, some 2017, some going beyond that also. So now we have an issue here. We don't know what is the account set. So then it comes to the issue of We don't know how much is the debt on the other side. So, Professor, how do you, I mean, you have worked in the public sector in different institutions. How can CMA and other get the government to move? I mean, we need the proper account set to decide whether we are standing or sitting. We don't know that first one. So what is your suggestion, Professor?
Yeah, I don't think it's a very big problem, because if they really want to do it, it can be done, but I don't think they have a will to carry it out, because you see, even a man who is in a boutique, he will give the day-to-day accounts, Now, if you take any institution, now today the biggest problem is the prices going up, the cost is going up. Every day the prices are being revised. But do you think that any of these institutions are maintaining any cost records? They must maintain their cost records. But even our legislation, maybe the Companies Act, these are of no use, We have so many regulatory authorities, they are not doing anything, So I think these are not very major problems, but it is really that the government does not want to take any action, If now we have the professional accountant, every corporation should have a professional accountant. Every ministry should have a finance director. Now, even in the UK, every ministry has a finance director, because our current problem is financial management. No? But who is managing these finances? It's not the professional accountants. I don't know from where they have come, but they must make use of professionals who can do a good job. So I see that it is not a problem with the accountants or the auditors. Now you see, the Auditor General is giving so many comments, no? So are they taking any action on that? No. They will put in the papers, they will shout and everything, but nothing is happening, Because you see, when a meeting is held, the first thing that you do now is that at the next meeting, you take up what we had discussed earlier. Then you see whether now we have pointed this out. Was remedial measures taken? No. So they even don't know how to conduct a meeting, So we have to teach them these basic things, because governing a country, now, you say, if I am a professional accountant, I have a professional training, the professional education, the practical training, but to become a politician, you don't need anything, no. You go to the public, they will. So then the authorities need to train them. They don't, because you see, even as a chartered accountant or a management accountant, when it goes to public finance, it's a government finance, it's entirely different, So you have to study all these things. So I think the whole system has to be changed. That's why they're asking for system change, because, we are now asking for loans from the government, from various, but we will take the loans, we will just spend it, or we will bust it up. Then what is the use? We have to see that whatever that we take, we need to use them in some value creation, what I'm telling you, so that we will get. So all these things are there. I can tell you immediately, you see, if now the government accepts what I'm telling you, that every state corporation should submit their accounts, the quarterly accounts within 1 month of the date. Now, supposing if it is a quarterly accounts, now by the 15th of August, all private sector institutions have to submit their accounts. So have that same thing. They don't need the CSE to do it, They have the finance ministry, all this. Just tell them. Ask them to publish it in the newspaper. Finish. So then everyone, all the public will see what are their accounts. So these are very simple things, but if they don't want to take any action, they can use it. But I think professional accountants, professional people, professional engineers, everyone should be involved, This is not especially with this current situation we have to professionally manage ourselves. Because the mismanagement, if you are not looking, if our finances have gone up to this extent, if the corporations are not submitting, you have to be strict, You have to be strict. You should have discipline. If no discipline is there, how can you run any organization? How can you run a country? So they talk of Lee Kuan Yew, all these things, but they don't know what he has done. No? If they really know what he has done, if you put a piece of paper on the ground, he will find you immediately. That is the law. But you can't say, I am so-and-so's friend, my father is so-and-so. No, you have to pay that. So Sri Lanka also has to follow that. No, because we have not followed all these things. We were the leading country in the Asian region in 48. Now we are the lowest. We have come really to the down, worse than some of the African countries. So how can we face the people? We can't face even our foreign friends, It is indeed a shame for us now. We have in our accounting profession, we have the South Asian Federation of Accountants. You think I can go and face any of them? They will say, I say, you are a top finance people, see what has happened to the country. So they will think that it is really very badly managed, So we are talking here, no one is bothered about, but when we talk the truth, these people don't want to listen to it. They only want someone to come and say, you are doing very good, you are doing this, you are doing that. We will give you a vote next time and then you'll be elected. That is not what we want, So at least that has to be realized. But on the accounting side, if they tell me now, I have sacrificed my life the first 20 years in state corporations. No? I have made them profitable, leather corporation, state mining mineral corporation. Now, who is earning the foreign exchange for this country. When I was chairman of the BOI, we started this project, the 200 garment factories program. That was to take the garment factories to the rural areas, get the rural girls, they will manufacture goods and take it to the overseas countries. Our rural girls exporting. Now, that is why all this foreign exchange now come from the export sector. So we did not eat up any foreign exchange. Today they are surviving because of us. So if they ask us, I can tell them what they have to do, but they don't know anything, They have mismanaged from 48 to today. We have mismanaged our whole country, That's why we are going to suffer so much. Yesterday, I was listening to a Buddhist sermon and the topic was on suffering. But suffering now, the suffering is coming from other authorities, It's not the suffering that where we do wrong things and we have to suffer. But people are suffering because of this mismanagement of this country, So suffering is the ultimate thing, That is, even in Buddhism, today we are a Buddhist country. That is the ultimate thing. Lord Buddha said everything is suffering. So now we have come to that stage because of this real nonsensical people who have really mismanaged and no one is responsible. That is the best part, No one is responsible, no one is accountable. So if you tell and implement these things, it's no problem. So thanks, Adrian. I hope I have given you an answer.
Yes, thank you, Professor. So I think we are on time. Professor, I think I put all the questions together, so even some of the comments. And as a closing remark, Professor, I will give it to you, I think.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I think it was a very excellent webinar, something different to the normal concept that we are talking of, because we are really talking of a debt, and now here, where we have brought the nature in, because people must realize the importance of the nature. I think our speaker, Ranjit, really gave a very good explanation of that, how people are making use of our facilities, and ultimately they have ruined us, They must give us what he has said, the debt, to reschedule the debts, give us the bridging finance, and help us to come out of this situation. So I think, Ranjit, that was an excellent thing. I only hope that people will listen to these things, because we have a course, as a result of this, people must look at us. You see, now actually, if you really look at the oil, the countries that have oil, when did they develop? After the oil prices went up, they all developed, They had so much of excess money. So why not at this stage, make use of the nature, because we are talking of sustainability. We have signed sustainability there. The sustainability development goals are there. All the countries have come together and signed these various agreements on sustainability. So I think it was very, very valid, and I think people should take note of it and help Sri Lanka at this very critical juncture, and also put controls, because we can't just give them all these facilities and ask them to go and increase the debt to now is 60 billion, go up to 120 billion. That's not what we want, to spend as they want, So we need to change the whole thing. And I think Shevan, Daniel, I think Shevan, it was the use of the sea, it's actually something that the Sea of Sri Lanka. That's a fantastic thing, because it actually what Ranjit said was really gone into more detail, more depth, and you really told the importance of the Sea of Sri Lanka. It's not the Indian Ocean, but the Sea of Sri Lanka. That's a great thing, We must have our own sea, We can't go to other countries and go to share it with them. But as you say, Hambantota, now you see, Hambantota is today maybe a place that we are not reckoning, but in time to come, that will be the most important item that we have, because we are really in a very important location, Geopolitically, Sri Lanka is in a very, very maybe strategic position. But our people are just giving these things free, They don't have their brains. They are just giving these things, and ultimately we are losing. So as Shevan said, yeah, I think these are assets we should take back. We should take back, because in time to come, these are the assets that are going to be worth that. So that's, I think, a very good thing. Then, of course, on the WAV system, I think the village WAV, that's a very important area. Not only the ancient engineering, the features that we have, they have been, I think, everywhere where they have really recognized it. The engineering feats of the Sri Lanka, the WAV, which is the tank system, which is, I think, one of the best in the whole world. So these are areas we have to take, but not to just to go and dig it up and then destroy it, or give it to foreign people to come and dig and then spoil all these things, but maintain these things so that we will be able to maintain the culture of the country. That's the real culture, is the tank. I think what you mentioned is really correct. So I think that really added more maybe authority to what Ranjit mentioned of what we are going to get. Then, of course, our expert on the environmental area, Anand, I think you justified it, because not only from the Sri Lankan side, but from the international side. Some suggestions, some ideas, which Sri Lanka will be able to be, if they make use of it, to take it and to see that this will be able to help not only our problems, but also the country, the culture, our agriculture, everything could be sorted out. As I said, the cost of power, if you use hydro, is ₹2. The gas turbines, it is ₹65. If it is the others, it is ₹23 or 24. So you can see the difference between these. So conserving this water, using this our ancient tank system and the current position that we are having will certainly help. So I must thank our moderator. I think Adrian has done an excellent job and put everyone together and got their thinking cap on and done this. So once again, let me thank all of you and all our participants. I know that a lot of them are there. They have sent very valuable questions, and we are very hopeful that this webinar that we have done will really be a turning point in the Sri Lankan debt problem that we are in, a solution to the debt pricing using nature. I do hope Shevan will be able to give the necessary publicity to this, because definitely if we are able to go behind this, we should not stop at this. We should take this forward and then see how they are going to implement. So once again, let me thank everyone, all of you, our council members from CMA, our participants, and wish you all the very best. And I'm sure that this webinar will bring some new life to all of us, and will be a solution to the debt crisis using nature. Thank you and all the very best.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Professor.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you,
Right.
Lakshman.